Under the cloak of a moonless night, a routine jog turned into a brutal ambush. It wasn't just a mugging, it was a chilling plot to silence me, orchestrated from within the very police force I commanded. The city breathes differently at night. During the day, it's a cacophony of sirens, horns, and a million overlapping conversations. But after midnight, it sighs. The sounds soften, becoming a low, steady hum that I've always found strangely comforting. It was on one of these nights, under a moonless sky, that my entire world tilted on its axis. The air was cool, carrying the damp metallic scent of the river from a few blocks over. I was jogging, my breath pluming in the faint glow of the sparse streetlights in Waterfront Park. It had been a brutal week. Budget meetings. That's all you need to know? Hours spent in a stuffy room, arguing with city council members who think policing is just about writing tickets and looking good in a parade. They wanted to cut our overtime budget, slash funding for community outreach, and delay the upgrades to our dispatch system. I'd spent 12 hours that day fighting for my officers, for the resources we needed to keep this city from eating itself alive. By the time I left my office, my head was pounding, a tight band of frustration squeezing my temples. My uniform felt like a cage. So, I did what I always do. I went home, changed into a plain gray hoodie and black leggings, and went for a run. No motorcade, no security detail. Just me, my running shoes, and the quiet streets. It's my church, my therapy. The rhythmic slap of my feet on the pavement is the only thing that can untangle the knots in my mind. I wasn't Chief Evelyn Reynolds, the first black woman to lead the city's police force. I was just Evie, a 48-year-old woman trying to outrun her own exhaustion. The park was mostly deserted, which was how I liked it. A few shadowy figures huddled on benches, but they were the usual residents of the night, harmless and lost in their own worlds. I rounded a familiar bend in the path, a section where the trees grow thick, creating a short tunnel of near-total darkness. The streetlight at the far end was flickering, casting the path in a strobe of weak, yellow light. It was in that pocket of darkness that I heard it. Not a footstep, not a snapped twig. A low laugh. My body went rigid before my mind even caught up. Every cop, every soldier, every person who has ever faced real danger knows that sound. It's not a laugh of joy. It's a laugh of predation. It's the sound an animal makes when it corners its prey. My pace didn't change, but my senses went into overdrive. I catalogued everything. 2 sources. To my left, slightly behind me, in the dense shrubbery. The smell of cheap cigarettes and unwashed bodies hit me a second later. My jog was no longer about clearing my head. It was about getting to the flickering streetlight 50 yards ahead. They were fast. They didn't rush me from behind. Instead, they moved like wolves flanking me. One moment the path was empty. The next, 2 figures materialized from the shadows, blocking my way. The strobing light painted them in jagged snapshots. One was big, a mountain of a man in a stained jacket, his face a mask of cruel amusement. The other was wiry, twitchy, with eyes that darted everywhere at once. "Well, well," the big one rumbled, his voice like gravel grinding together. "Look what we got here. A little lamb, lost in the woods." My heart was a jackhammer against my ribs, but my training took over. My mind became a cold, clear space. Assess the threat. 2 hostiles, both male, appear unarmed for now. Distance, 10 feet. Escape routes. Back the way I came, or try to push through them. Bad options. I slowed to a stop, pulling my hood down slightly, keeping my face shadowed. I raised my hands in a placating gesture. "I don't want any trouble," I said, keeping my voice steady, even. I pitched it a little higher, a little more afraid than I actually felt. Prey, not predator. That's what they had to believe. "Oh, you're not trouble, sweet thing," the wiry one hissed, taking a step closer. He had a nervous energy that made him far more dangerous than the big one. "You're an opportunity. Phone, wallet, now." I slowly reached into the pocket of my hoodie. My fingers brushed against my keys, and for a split second, I calculated the damage I could do with them. But no. De-escalate, comply. That's the protocol we teach civilians. Give them what they want. Okay, just take it easy, I said, pulling out my phone. It was an old burner I used for running, no sensitive data on it. I held it out. Here, it's all I have. The big man grunted, unimpressed. The wallet. I don't carry one when I run, I told them, the absolute truth. The wiry one's eyes narrowed. You lying? He took another step, closing the distance. The smell of stale beer washed over me. He reached out and grabbed my arm, his fingers digging into my bicep like claws. And that's when everything changed. The moment his hand touched me, the civilian persona I was projecting evaporated. The de-escalation protocol ended. This was no longer a robbery. It was an assault. My body moved on instinct, a decade of defensive tactics training compressed into a single, fluid motion. I didn't pull away. I moved with his grab, stepping in closer, rotating my body. I used his own momentum against him, my free hand coming up and striking the pressure point on the inside of his wrist. His grip vanished with a yelp of pain and surprise. Before he could recover, my elbow shot upwards, connecting solidly with the bridge of his nose. I heard a sickening, wet crunch, and he staggered back, a dark spray erupting from his face as he screamed. The big man stared, his jaw slack with disbelief. He'd seen a lone woman, an easy target. He hadn't seen a coiled spring. His shock lasted only a second before his face twisted into a mask of pure rage. He bellowed and lunged, his massive fists swinging for my head. I ducked under the clumsy punch, feeling the air whisper past my ear. But as I came up, preparing to counter, a glint of metal caught the flickering streetlight. The wiry one, blood streaming down his face, was back on his feet, and in his hand was a knife. His eyes weren't just twitchy anymore. They were murderous. He lunged, not at my body, but straight for my throat. There is no time for thought, only for action. The world narrows to the 10 inches of cheap, serrated steel aimed at my carotid artery. My body doesn't move back. That's a fatal mistake. You never give ground to a blade. I pivot on the ball of my left foot, a sharp, violent twist that brings my body offline from the thrust. At the same time, my right forearm comes up, not to block the knife, but to crash into the attacker's elbow, hyperextending it with a sickening pop. A strangled scream rips from his throat, a sound of agony and shock. The knife clatters to the asphalt. His momentum carries him past me, and I give him a helping hand, shoving him hard between the shoulder blades. He stumbles forward, directly into the path of his lumbering partner. The big man, caught mid-lunge, has to check his own charge to avoid trampling his accomplice. It's the only opening I need. Chaos is a weapon if you know how to wield it. While they were tangled for a split second, I moved. I didn't go for the big man's head. He was too tall, and his center of gravity was too high. I went low. I drove my shoulder into his midsection, wrapping my arms around his thighs in a classic takedown. It was like tackling a refrigerator, but he was off balance, surprised. His fury had made him sloppy. His feet left the ground, and he went down with a thunderous crash that seemed to shake the very pavement. The air exploded from his lungs in a pained whoosh. I scrambled back, putting space between us, my eyes darting from the man on the ground to the one with the dislocated elbow. The wiry one was cradling his arm, his face a grotesque mask of blood, tears, and hatred. But the fight was gone from his eyes, replaced by pure agony. The big one was trying to push himself up, his breath coming in ragged gasps. He was dazed, the back of his head having bounced off the concrete. My own lungs were on fire. Adrenaline, cold and sharp, coursed through me. My training room is padded. The street is not. He wasn't getting up easily. I kicked the knife away, sending it skittering into the darkness under a park bench. One threat neutralized. Now for the other. "Stay down," I commanded, my voice dropping back into its natural register. The voice I use in the briefing room. Low, calm, and absolute. It carried the weight of authority I had earned over 30 years of service. For the first time, a flicker of something other than rage crossed the big man's face. Confusion. He was hearing a commander, not a victim. He ignored me, of course. Pride is a powerful and stupid motivator. He got to his hands and knees, shaking his head like a bear trying to clear a tranquilizer dart. I didn't give him the chance to get any further. I closed the distance in 2 quick steps and drove a hard, precise kick into the side of his ribs. I felt the bones give. It wasn't a movie kick. It was a targeted, disabling strike. He collapsed onto his side with a wet, guttural scream, clutching his chest. Silence. The only sounds were the distant city hum, the pained whimpers of the wiry man, and the big one's ragged, painful breathing. I stood between them, my own breath starting to even out. I did a quick self-assessment. My arm was scraped raw where I'd deflected the knife attack, a thin line of blood welling up. My knuckles were bruised. A deep ache was starting to bloom in my shoulder. But I was functional. I was in control. I looked down at them, these 2 men who had seen a woman jogging alone and decided she was prey. The fury that I'd kept locked down during the fight began to bubble up, hot and acidic. Not for me. I could handle myself. The anger was for the countless others who couldn't. The women who walked with their keys between their fingers, who pretended to be on the phone, who took the long way home to stay in the light. This city was my responsibility. These men, this violence, this was my failure. I reached into the small, hidden pocket on the waistband of my leggings and pulled out my real phone. The screen lit up my face, illuminating my grim expression. My thumb hovered over the direct line to dispatch. I was about to make the call of a lifetime. "This is Reynolds. I've been assaulted at Waterfront Park North Entrance. 2 suspects, both male, now in custody. Send a bus and a supervisor." I could already imagine the pandemonium that would erupt on the other end of the line. But before I could press the button, I heard it. A sound that cut through the night. A sound every cop knows better than their own heartbeat. The crunch of gravel under the slow-moving tires of a patrol car. Headlights swung around the bend, sweeping across the tableau of violence and pinning us in their glare. The car, a standard black and white, rolled to a stop about 30 feet away. It was just a routine patrol, a random pass through the park. My officers. The driver's side door opened, and a young officer, barely a year on the force, stepped out. He used his door as a shield, his hand resting on the butt of his holstered Glock. His voice was tense, loud, and by the book. "Police! Let me see your hands. Step away from them. Now." I complied instantly, raising my hands slowly to show they were empty. The light was blinding, putting me at a disadvantage. He couldn't see my face clearly, just the silhouette of a woman in a hoodie standing over 2 injured men. To him, I was the aggressor. The irony was so thick I could taste it. Then, the passenger door opened. Another officer got out, younger still, a kid named Miller. I'd given him his badge myself just 6 months ago. He raised his flashlight, its powerful beam cutting a perfect circle in the darkness that landed squarely on my face. He took a half step forward, his partner yelling at him to hold his position. But Miller was frozen. The flashlight beam trembled, his knuckles white where he gripped it. His mouth opened, but no sound came out. Then, his voice, cracked with utter disbelief and horror, echoed in the sudden dead silence of the park. "Holy hell! Chief?" The word hung in the air, electric and impossible. "Chief?" It wasn't a question so much as a rupture in reality. The first officer, whose name tag I could now just make out as Davis, whipped his head towards his partner, then back to me, his brow furrowed in utter confusion. His hand was still on his weapon, his training warring with the absurdity of what Miller had just said. "Miller, what are you talking about?" Davis snapped, his voice tight with tension. "Who is that?" "It's the chief, man. It's Chief Reynolds," Miller stammered, finally lowering his flashlight beam from my eyes. He took a hesitant step forward, then another, his face a mixture of awe and sheer panic. I lowered my hands slowly. "It's all right, Officer Miller," I said, my voice calm and even, cutting through the chaos. "Officer Davis, you can stand down. The scene is secure." Davis looked like he'd been struck by lightning. His eyes darted from my face to the bloody man with the dislocated arm, to the massive form groaning on the ground. He was trying to process an equation that didn't compute. The city's highest-ranking law enforcement officer, dressed in civilian running gear, standing over two freshly beaten thugs in a dark park. His hand finally, reluctantly, left the grip of his pistol. "Chief." "Ma'am, what happened?" he asked, his voice now laced with a deference that was jarringly out of place with his initial aggressive commands. "I was jogging. These two gentlemen decided to try and relieve me of my property," I explained, gesturing with my chin towards the two men. "They became uncooperative." That was the understatement of the year. Miller was now beside me, his eyes wide as he took in the scene. He saw the knife glinting under the bench, the dark spray of blood on the wiry man's face, the unnatural angle of the big man's ribs as he breathed in shallow, pained gasps. "Did they hurt you, Chief?" Miller asked, his voice full of genuine concern. "I'm fine, Miller. A few scrapes," I reassured him. "Call it in. We need paramedics for these two, and I want a detective supervisor to roll to this location, forthwith." "Yes, ma'am," he said, turning to head back to the patrol car, but I stopped him. "And Miller," I added, my voice hardening slightly, "use your personal cell. I want this kept off the main dispatch channel for now. The last thing we need is the whole world listening in on this circus." He nodded, understanding immediately. The media would have a field day with this. Police chief in midnight brawl. It would be a nightmare, a public relations disaster that would overshadow every budget fight, every policy change, every single piece of good work my officers did. As Miller made the call, Davis cautiously approached the two suspects, his professionalism taking over, now that the initial shock had passed. He cuffed the big man first, who offered no resistance, only groans of pain. Then he moved to the wiry one, who was still cradling his arm and sobbing. It was all by the book, clean and efficient. I watched them, a strange sense of detachment settling over me. I wasn't just a victim anymore. I was the chief on a crime scene. My crime scene. Within 10 minutes, the park was no longer quiet. The flashing red and blue lights of an ambulance and a supervisor's car painted the trees in frantic, silent strokes. Sergeant Henderson, a grizzled veteran with 25 years on the job and a face like a roadmap of every bad call he'd ever been on, was the first detective on the scene. He climbed out of his unmarked sedan, took one look at me, at the two suspects being loaded onto gurneys, and his weary expression somehow managed to deepen. "Evie," he said, forgoing any formality. "We'd come up through the ranks together. Don't tell me you decided to skip your security detail again?" "I needed to clear my head, Frank," I replied, crossing my arms. The adrenaline was wearing off, replaced by a deep, bone-weary exhaustion. "And you decided to clear it by using these two morons as punching bags," he said, a ghost of a smile touching his lips before vanishing. He turned serious. "Are you okay? For real?" "I'm fine. They're not," I said flatly. They pulled a knife. Frank's face darkened. He nodded, his gaze sweeping the area. "Miller told me you wanted this kept quiet. Good luck with that. The paramedics have mouths, the hospital staff have ears. This is going to leak, Evie. By sunup, every news van in the state will be parked outside the precinct." He was right. I knew he was right. This wouldn't stay contained. It was too big, too sensational. The image of me, a black woman, not just defending herself but utterly disabling two male attackers, would be twisted and turned 100 different ways. To some, I'd be a hero. To others, a vigilante. My enemies on the city council would call me reckless, a liability. They would use it as ammunition in our budget war, painting me as an out-of-control chief who invites trouble. "We'll deal with that when it happens," I said, though my stomach churned at the thought. "For now, I want a full workup. Get them to the hospital, patch them up, and then park them in an interview room. I want to know who they are. I want to know if this was random, or if they were waiting for me." The thought sent a chill down my spine that had nothing to do with the night air. Was this a simple mugging gone wrong? Or was it something more? Had they known who I was? Had someone sent them? My fight with the council? My push to reform the department's old guard? I had made powerful enemies. Frank nodded grimly. Already on it. An hour later, I was sitting in Frank's passenger seat, a blanket draped over my shoulders, and a cup of lukewarm coffee in my hand. We were parked across the street from the park, which was now crawling with forensics techs combing the area under portable floodlights. The suspects were on their way to the hospital under police guard, The initial adrenaline had faded completely, leaving behind a throbbing ache in my shoulder and a deep, unsettling quiet in my soul. Frank's phone buzzed. He answered, listened for a moment, his eyes fixed on me. "Yeah? Got it." He hung up and turned to me, his expression unreadable. "What is it?" I asked. "We got a preliminary ID on the big one. His name is Marcus Thorne. He's got a sheet a mile long. Assault, robbery, the usual." Frank paused, taking a deep breath. "But it's his last known employer that's interesting." "And who would that be?" "He worked security," Frank said, letting the words hang in the air, "for a private firm that handles event security all over the city, including, as of 3 months ago, all events at City Hall." He looked at me, and I saw the pieces clicking into place behind his eyes, the same ones that were clicking into place in my own mind. It wasn't just a random mugging. This was a message. But he wasn't done. He looked down at his phone again, then back at me, his face pale in the glow of the streetlights. "That's not the half of it, Evie," he said, his voice dropping to a near whisper. "The wiry one, the one with the knife. We just ran his prints. His name is Leo Gant." I stared at him, the name meaning nothing to me. "And?" Frank swallowed hard, a muscle twitching in his jaw. "And his brother is Detective Richard Gant. Internal Affairs." The name hit me like a physical blow. Detective Richard Gant. A name that had become a thorn in my side for the past 6 months. He was a holdover from the old guard, a man who saw my appointment as a personal insult to his vision of what the force should be. He was a snake in the grass, constantly filing frivolous complaints against my best officers, trying to undermine my authority from within the one department designed to police our own. He represented everything I was fighting against, the corruption, the nepotism, the rot that festered in the dark corners of the department. And his brother had just tried to cut my throat. "It can't be a coincidence, Frank," I said, the words barely a whisper. The coffee in my hand felt cold as ice. The world had shrunk to the confines of this car, to this single, horrifying revelation. This wasn't a message from the city council. This was a message from inside my own house. "No," Frank said, his voice grim. "It can't be." The exhaustion I felt moments before was burned away by a surge of cold, focused fury. This changed everything. This wasn't a PR problem anymore. This was a conspiracy. An attempted murder of a police chief, orchestrated from within the Internal Affairs Division. "Get Gant," I said, my voice flat and hard. "Get him now. Don't call his CO. I want your most trusted guys, plain clothes, no sirens. Pick him up at his house. Tell him he's wanted for questioning in connection with an aggravated assault. Don't mention me. Don't mention his brother. Just bring him in. And Frank, secure his office. I want a warrant for every file, every computer, every shred of paper in there. I want to know who he's been talking to." Frank didn't hesitate. He was already on his phone, his voice low and urgent as he gave the orders. He knew as well as I did that we were crossing the Rubicon. Accusing an IA detective of conspiracy to murder the chief of police was a declaration of war. If I was wrong, my career would be over. My reputation would be shattered. But if I was right, I would be saving the soul of my department. The next few hours were a blur of controlled chaos. I refused medical attention, signing the release against the paramedics' advice. I went to a secure room at the central precinct, not my office, and watched through a one-way mirror as Frank's team brought in Richard Gant. He was indignant, blustering about his rights, demanding to know what was going on. He was a man used to being the one asking the questions, the one holding all the power. He looked smaller, less intimidating, without his badge and his sanctimony. His brother, Leo, was in another interview room down the hall, his arm in a sling, his face swollen and bruised. He'd asked for a lawyer the moment they sat him down. Smart. Marcus Thorne, the big man, was still at the hospital with his broken ribs, but he was already talking. He claimed Leo hired him for a simple scare job, promising him $5,000 to rough up some woman in the park who was making trouble for his brother. He swore he didn't know who I was and didn't know Leo was bringing a knife. The linchpin was Richard Gant. Without his confession, all I had was the word of a career criminal and a circumstantial connection. It wasn't enough. Frank went in to interview him. I watched on the monitor as he played it cool, asking Gant about his whereabouts, his activities. Gant was arrogant, evasive. He sneered. He postured. He thought he was untouchable. Then Frank played his ace. He slid a single, glossy 8x10 photo across the table. It was a still from a traffic camera, time-stamped 2 hours before the attack. It showed a car parked half a block from Waterfront Park. Richard Gant was in the driver's seat, and in the passenger seat, clear as day, was his brother, Leo. Gant's composure shattered. The blood drained from his face. He stared at the photo, his bravado crumbling into dust. He had driven his brother to the attack. He was the wheelman. He was directly involved. Frank let the silence stretch. Then he leaned forward. "Your brother's in the next room, Richie. He's got a dislocated elbow and a shattered nose. Marcus Thorne has 3 broken ribs. They failed. Now you can either go down with them for attempted murder of a police officer, or you can tell me who else was in on this, because we both know you're not smart enough to have planned this on your own." That's when he broke. The whole sordid story came tumbling out. It wasn't just Gant. It was a small cabal of old-school officers, men who felt their power base eroding under my leadership. Gant named them all. Deputy Chief Matheson, 2 union reps, a handful of senior sergeants. They felt I was destroying the department with my reforms, my focus on community policing, my promotion of women and officers of color. So they decided to destroy me. The plan was simple. Have a couple of thugs rough me up on my nightly run. Make it look like the city was too dangerous for a woman to handle. Humiliate me. Force my resignation. But Leo, unstable and nursing a grudge, had brought a knife. He'd escalated a scare job into an assassination attempt. By sunrise, as the first news vans were indeed pulling up outside the precinct, it wasn't to report on a chief who couldn't keep herself safe. It was to report on the arrest of a deputy chief and 7 other officers in the largest corruption scandal the city had ever seen. I held the press conference myself. I didn't hide my scraped arm or the exhaustion in my eyes. I stood at the podium, not as a victim, but as the chief who had just ripped a cancer out of her own department. I told the truth, the whole unvarnished story. I laid the conspiracy bare for the entire city to see. The aftermath was a storm, but it was a cleansing one. The city council, horrified by the plot, unlocked the funding I needed without a single dissenting vote. The corrupt union reps were ousted. The department, though shaken, began to heal. The officers who had been loyal, who believed in the work we were doing, rallied around me with a fierce new sense of purpose. I still run in the park at night. It's still my church. But things are different now. Sometimes a patrol car will shadow me from a distance, a silent, respectful guardian. They know I can handle myself, but they also know they are there to protect one of their own. They're not just protecting the chief of police anymore. They're protecting Evie. And as my feet hit the pavement in the cool night air, I know, deep in my bones, that this city, my city, is finally safe. Not just from the thugs in the dark, but from the ones who used to wear a badge.